for donating their time, sharing their value. Hi there. Just making an intro here, donating their time, sharing their valuable insights, and shaping the city of Boston into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all of its citizens. We're thrilled to be meeting in our first hybrid session, and we ask for your patience. We're going to try to use this meeting to work out some of the technical issues that we might discover along the way. But one thing that we did learn from Christina is that we really need to talk one person at a time, or the microphones, once they hear crosstalk, will just go mute. So that's something just to keep in mind. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. So please take note of that. And it will be available by the commission staff. So I can't see who is online from commissioners, but I did look at the roll call. So please, as I call your name, say present. Linda Easley. She was probably going to be joining us later, I believe. Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Present. Mimi, I just wanted to add that there's no camera on all of you. I don't know if you're aware of that.
We are aware. You'll only be able to see the screen and hear our voices. There's no video recording in the room. So thanks, Shauna.
Okay, so knowing that, I'm going to go on at Laura Solano.
Present.
Okay, Kirk Sykes.
Present.
In person, Jonathan Garland.
Present.
David Haseen.
Present.
Kathy Coderitas.
Present.
Diana Fernandez.
Present.
And myself, Mimi Love. I believe Commissioners Manfredi, Commissioner Morris, Commissioner Nagahiro, and Commissioner Kim are not with us this evening. If that's not correct, please let us know.
I'm present till 6:30.
Oh,
This is Catherine Morris.
Catherine.
Yep.
All right, excellent. Thank you for letting us know. Perfect. All right. So next we have a motion to approve the subcommittee meeting minutes for October 7th and October 21st. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thanks. Shauna, I'm going to call each one of you and say yay or nay. Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Yay.
Laura Solano.
Yay.
Kirk Sykes.
Yay.
Jonathan Garland.
Yay.
David Haseen.
Yay.
Kathy Coderitas.
Yes.
And then myself. Oh, Catherine Morris.
Yes.
Myself, Mimi Love. Yes. So the meeting minutes are approved. We have a short agenda today, so I'm going to hand it off. We have a presentation for review. This is the first time we'll be looking at 275, 279 Center Street in Jamaica Plain, referred to as Mildred Hailey. We've seen this in the past, but this is phase 4. I believe Commissioner Gillis-Smith is recused. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So Shauna, we would tell you normally just to turn on your camera, if that is, and you can certainly listen in, and we definitely need you here for the vote because we are at quorum right now. And so with that, I'm going to pass it along.
We actually need to vote to review the project.
Okay.
I have a quick summary and then we'll do a
Okay. Pass it on to Christina to describe the
My
project.
apologies.
Yeah, no.
Chair. A project at 275 through 279 Center Street, Jamaica Plain, also known as Mildred Hailey Phase 4, associated with the previously reviewed and approved Mildred Hailey 121A master plan, contemplates the demolition of 2 existing buildings and the development of approximately 191,000 square feet of residential units, or 179 units, and 64 parking spaces in 2 new buildings. The proponent filed a project notification form on September 12, 2025, and Planning Department staff hosted a public meeting on October 27th. Though the total square footage of the proposed project is under the threshold required for review by Article 81, Formal project approvals described the commission's review process, and the planning department staff recommend that the commission vote to review the proposed project.
All right, commissioners, do I have a motion to review the project?
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. So I'm going to call on each one of you. Shauna Goldsmith.
Do I
Actually,
vote or do I'm recused?
No, you could say recused.
Recused.
Laura Solano.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Yay.
now. So,
Yay.
okay, great. Thank you. Kirk Sykes,
Yay.
Jonathan Garland,
Yes.
David Hustine,
Yes.
Kathy Koderitas,
Yes.
and myself, Catherine Morris,
Yes.
Mimi Love, yes. So we have approved, and we'll be reviewing the project. And with that, we'll pass on to Megan Richards, who's going to walk us through some planning issues. The proponent will then go next, and then we'll hand it back to you for urban design comments. Okay.
Hey,
Thank
Mimi.
you. Yeah.
This is Mick Young. Seth asked me to join at the last minute because he told me you guys don't have a quorum. Do you need me tonight? I had initially intended not to attend, but I was coming here.
So we definitely
have quorum now.
We have quorum now.
Uh-huh.
So if you
I
have a
to
conflict,
depart at 6:15, so I can stay from 5 to 6:15 if that's helpful to
that
you
would be
guys.
great.
Okay,
I think that
if
would
you
be
need
helpful.
me. All right, I will. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ms. Young.
Thank you. So I'm Megan Richards, the senior urban designer reviewing this project. And I'm going to present a little bit of the planning context for this first here. So here on the left-hand side was the original 121A master plan that was approved in 2021. The key piece here to notice is that building 4 was that large donut-shaped building, and Lamartine Street had a vehicular and pedestrian connection to Center Street at the time the master plan was approved. In 2023, they updated the master plan. BTD had weighed in and said they were not interested in the vehicular connection of Lamartine to Center Street at the time. And I should back up and say one of the key important aspects of the overall master plan for the redevelopment at Mildred Hailey was really the idea of replacing the existing buildings with new, modern buildings with modern amenities for the residents there, but also knitting it back into the overall fabric of the community there, that instead of it feeling like this isolated complex, really trying to think about how it is part of JP, the larger JP community and neighborhood there in Jackson Square. So, we were a bit disappointed without the Lamartine vehicular connection and the true street kind of connecting the neighborhood, but I think the creation of additional public open space there was like a very positive reaction to no longer have Lamartine connect. At the time in 2023, we asked them to really consider breaking up the massing of building 4. So they are now here in 2025 with their proposal to move forward with building 4 broken into 2 buildings. So they're moving forward with phase 4A first, and then they'll be coming through and constructing 4B at a later date. They have one of the key features of the 121A master plan was maintaining a 0.5 parking ratio for the existing Mildred Hailey tenants. So, and the master plan called for any of the proposed parking was happening at buildings 1A and 1B in an underground parking garage, and then building 4 was supposed to have underground parking. Now that they're here with building 4, they no longer can afford to do the underground parking, so we had to look at an alternative parking solution as well as part of this update with building 4. Next slide. So in terms of, we wanted to give you set the stage with some of the urban design context of what we had worked into. So again, it was the idea of building 4 felt too large and was kind of creating that super block, which we felt was going against the idea of knitting fabric, like back into the fabric of the existing Jackson Square neighborhood. We also think it's important, one of the important design features or components to this is that there is that strong Center Street edge to phase 4B, and so creating that Center Street wall, it's the only portion of the building that has a retail commercial component there along Center Street. to really help like activate that and contribute to that overall Center Street Madison Square feel. And then the Lamartine no longer connecting meant there's that public open space, and it has a very public plaza portion there at the end at Center Street, and then becomes a greener public open space as you move through the site up to United Street behind in the more internal Mildred Hailey development. I think that's it for this part.
So we'll turn it over to the proponent. I'll get a timer going. Just a reminder, we'll set a timer for 10 minutes, and I'll let you know when 2 minutes remains.
Maybe I'll just note that I believe Commissioner Eastley joined us during that introduction, so.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I know we have about 10 minutes, so I'll keep this part brief, but my name is Robert Smith Mendez. I'm a development project manager with the Community Builders. We're the developer for this project, and I just want to quickly introduce our team presenting this evening. We're joined by Mark Eclipse, who's our architect from PCA, and Amy Linsenmeyer, who's our landscape architect from Ground. We're really excited to share with you all our plans for Mildred Hailey Phase 4 with you tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Oh, Mark, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. As Robert said, I'm Mark Eclipse with PCA Architects. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. So just very quickly, Megan mentioned a lot of things about the master plan, but we'll just sort of look at this in context with feedback that we've received over the past couple of years, really, from a lot of different sources. Megan mentioned changing from a single donut-shaped building to 2 distinct volumes. What that does is it sort of puts these 2 buildings more into a similar scale to the other buildings of the master plan, rather than being something separate from all of the others. And sort of breaks the monotony of those buildings and the existing buildings that are all sort of the similar height and material. The other big feature about them is that 4A is a 5-story building and 4B is a 6-story building. All of the other buildings in the master plan are, sorry, 4B is a 7-story building. All of the other buildings in the master plan are 6. So there was feedback to create a little bit more variety just in the scale and massing of the buildings. As Megan mentioned, the parking has changed from being underground parking to at-grade parking, but 50% of that parking is underneath the buildings. So it reduces the amount of exposed asphalt, it reduces the view of the parking spaces from the courtyard, and also gives us the ability to plant some trees in the center and do a little bit of green infrastructure, rain garden, and permeable paving. And so you can also see how we fit into the context of the site with the retail along Center Street, and strong connections from the T to the retail grocery store and off to other parts of the city. Again, connecting this neighborhood back into the rest of the city. Just some context, the upper row shows our building dashed in red in the context along Center Street and Bickford Street. The center row is other buildings in the Mildred Hailey neighborhood. And the bottom are some buildings around us that have given us some inspiration for the design, looking at some of these active ground floors and some of the details of the buildings where there's horizontal coursing that provides human scaled elements, but also a lot of vertical elements and vertical piers that provide some rhythm and shadow lines. So the next page, some design diagrams, really looking at light, views, and scale. So the top shows that when we break these buildings, it actually allows more light into the center. So we've got a morning sun study and an afternoon sun study about how the light can come sort of streaming through those breaks. But also in these sort of blue, you can see that the residents that have apartments that face in don't only look into the courtyard, but they actually have some views out of the courtyard into the community as well. The diagrams on the lower floor show a 2-story brick base on building 4B along Center Street. And so that provides a sense of that pedestrian scale, but also being 2 stories in brick sort of helps it to fit into the civic scale of Center Street. And then you can see a 6-story sort of cornice line that aligns with many of the 6-story buildings in the rest of the master plan. And then our building set 4B is 7 stories. And we've set that back and changed the material to really reduce some of the apparent bulk. You can see the 5-story building of 4A, where that 5 stories reduces that scale, but we've created on 4A also a 1-story brick base, adjusting that's pedestrian scale, but also aligning with some of the 1-story bases on the previous buildings in the Mildred Hailey neighborhood. Now I will turn it over to Amy to talk about the landscape.
Thanks, Mark. So on the left-hand side, you'll see this site plan for Building 2 that was recommended for approval by BCDC back in December of 2023. And in between the two buildings, you can see La Martine Park, which we've kept largely the same as in our current site plan. And you see La Martine Park all the way on the right-hand side of the slide, just to orient you. So today we'll be talking about everything to the left-hand side of the path as part of 4A and 4B's scope. So a couple additional components of the landscape. The path is anchored on both sides by flexible plaza space. At United Street, you have a shared entry plaza and drop-off area. At Center Street, you have a larger multi-use plaza that's between commercial space and the community room in Building 2. The park also has a small lawn area, a secondary accessible path, seating steps, and specialty planting. The streetscapes at Center and United Streets all contain street trees, bicycle racks, and permeable paving. At Center Street, it's a little bit larger and more specialty hardscape paving to accommodate for the commercial nature of the building. And at United Street, we have a thicker green buffer to provide a little bit more privacy for the residences along the street. The Parker Street Extension streetscape is fairly small and more service oriented. So Mark talked a little bit about the green infrastructure at the interior courtyard, but I'll quickly mention that the amenity terrace at number 10 in between the two buildings is at the building level of 4A, which is meant to partially shield the parking in the center. Next slide. So the section at the top here is cut through lengthwise through the park, and you can see a 7-foot grade change across the site from the Center Street Plaza to the United Street Plaza. And so in the in the left-hand side, you have the plaza that's more active in character. There's space to park a small food truck, to host small events, and also to accommodate for spillover from the commercial plaza, the commercial space next door. So the section, the path across the park is kept between 3% and 5% and is both shared pedestrian and cycle path. Next slide, please. This section cuts through the parking courtyard, that raised resident amenity terrace, and down through the park itself. And you can see in the slide below, you have the shared path in the foreground, the secondary path on the right, the seating steps and lawn in the center, and you can also see the amenity terrace in the background, and note how you can't see the parking. And then you have the activated Center Street Civic Plaza on the left-hand side. Next, please. This slide, the view is taken from the 4A entry plaza looking down towards Center Street, and you see a slightly leveled out lawn area that's flanked by seating on both sides so that parents can safely watch their kids play. And I also want to note that the planting palette that we're carrying is largely native. We have flowering dogwoods and sweet gum trees lining the path along the left-hand side, and perennial shrubs and native perennials and shrubs in the planter beds in between. And then lastly, moving slightly north, we have the shared entry plaza at 4A. And I will pass it back to Mark.
Thanks, Amy. So looking at a little closer up at the plan, this shows sort of our how our activation in purple. It shows the commercial space along Center Street. The red of the two buildings are our amenities and lobbies, which are meant to activate the adjacent outdoor spaces. And then you can see the access to the parking and how the parking is half underneath the building and just only the center spaces that are open to the air. You can see the bike rooms are located with very convenient access to United and Parker Streets, which leads you down to the Southwest Corridor or to the retail or to Center Street. In the upper floors, 65% are 2-bedroom, 3-bedrooms, trying to meet the needs for family housing. And you can get a sense of how the 7th floor steps back to reduce that apparent mass. Looking at the elevations of the building, these are the elevations of building 4A, and you get a sense of that 1-story brick base that rises up at the entry corner, and you can see the relationship of that entry corner to the entry corner of building 3. And you can see the 2-story brick base on Center Street of building 4B. And then the elevations of 4B, Center Street is the top, and you can see the retail and commercial spaces here. The entry lobby to 4B is on this corner. And then that brick base continues all the way around along that Parker Street side. And then going to
Mark, a heads up on time.
2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the view from Lamartine Street. Building 1B is in the background. Building 3 is on the right. Building 2 is on the left, and that open space is in the center. And so you can see that 1-story brick rising up and the sort of expression of the vertical piers giving that rhythm and shadow line. Moving down, looking at the buildings in the building 4B in context along Center Street. This is looking to the east with the entrance to 4B. And then this is looking from the other direction, the MBTA station here on the right, building 2, and then you can see the open plaza. And then this is a little bit closer view of that plaza space, really activated by the brick base of 4B, a very tall potential commercial space on this corner. Because of that grade change that Amy had mentioned, this allows us to have a space that's really conducive to, say, a restaurant or other commercial space. And then you can see 4A in the distance. Thank you very much. We really look forward to your comments.
Thanks, Mark. We'll pass it back to Megan.
Going to be Marco and then Mike.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Marco Sanchez. I'm a landscape architect with the planning department. For building 4 and the site design, we're looking at open space, parking, and how circulation works on the site. Regarding parking, we're pushing to make the parking area more of an opportunity to be enjoyed and serve residents. Right now, I think the sectional experience could be stronger. The open space, there's significant grade change, and we're trying to ensure, we're asking the question, is this experience inclusive and welcoming? At the edge of Center Street, there's a lot of elements in the landscaping. We want to smooth transitions to eliminate conflicts between bikers and pedestrians and people trying to use the retail areas. And I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was the parking entry off of Parker Street. So we want to highlight the pedestrian experience. We want to highlight the pedestrian experience here and make the space more welcoming and enjoyable, with pedestrians at the forefront of this experience, given that we're so close to transit.
Thanks, Martha. I think I just have a couple more slides. So in terms of the design review, really for building 4A, we were looking at the fenestration pattern and, as Mark mentioned, like the kind of vertical piers and the stripes. We're just a little concerned that maybe it appears too vertical and the striping is a bit too much. So really trying to think about how we can follow the original design intent, but come up with a fenestration pattern that we feel more comfortable with. The other aspect that we want to study more closely is how it meets the sky and how should it be through a stronger cornice, or should we kind of use a base, middle, top traditional approach to the building that might help ease both of those concerns? So really working with the team on those things as well. If we go to the next slide, I think the last important feature that or concern that we have is, and I don't know if it's concern, but aspect of the project that we want to make sure that we're talking about and that we get right with the team is, so they're proposing to move forward with phase 4A first and making sure that the interim conditions, that we're all on the same page about what that will be. Obviously, like we said, this is along Center Street, and like what that will be until they're ready to move forward with 4B is very important. And especially considering the kind of open parking court, that will be the condition that will then be exposed. And so like what kind of, given the grade change, what kind of retaining walls will there be, and how will that impact this interim open space condition until they're ready to move forward with 4B. Oh, thanks.
All right, thank you. So commissioners, maybe one question we should just confirm with Christina. This would be the first of how many meetings we would have to review this project?
3, although no, it's my understanding that no additional board action will be needed for the project.
Okay.
So this is really in anticipation of their funding rounds. I believe in February is our sort of total review deadline, but through the 121A approval, they have entitlements needed and no further board action will be. So there's no, at the end of the procedure, there's no need to recommend what's happening with the board action.
Okay. And then it seems like we're reviewing both 4A and 4B.
Yes, collectively
the
a single
architecture
project.
and single project. Okay. So with that, commissioners, comments?
Do we want to talk about landscape and then architecture, or I'm just, you know, it feels like they're two very sort of distinct topics at hand.
Yeah, I recommend talking about landscape, the ground floor, first, and then we talk about the architecture.
Okay.
The one thing I'm a little concerned about is, and I don't know if Lizzie, you're going to help navigate, I can't see the commissioners, so raising hands is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but.
And can I ask one clarification, because maybe I missed it in the presentation, but between the two phases, is there a projected time for full completion, or was that just as resources are available? It's not firm, is really more the point.
Yeah. They submitted for the MOH funding round already for 4A, and so they'll be submitting to the state for 4A in February, but I don't think we know a projected 4B timeline.
So but the idea is that interim landscape could be quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, maybe that was going to be my first question. It feels like what happens on Center Street is going to be pretty important and be there for a while. Maybe it's too big of an ask, but I do think, having 4B go first seems like a better plan than 4A. I'm sure this was considered and reviewed for, all kinds of reasons, but can you give us a little bit of sense of the logic of why 4A is going before 4B?
I can give a little bit of, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I can give a little bit more context as to from a funding perspective, but maybe others on our team can chime in from a more technical construction perspective. One reason we're proceeding with 4A is currently the affordable housing funding environment is pretty tight on resources, building 4A being the smaller of the two buildings at 67 units versus the 112 units, and also at 5 stories. We feel as if it's more feasible to put that building in for funding first before 4B. As optimistic as we want to be as developers, we hope that the affordable housing resources that funding environment will improve by the time that we move forward with 4B. We have done several, cost mitigation measures and to better position us to move both projects forward. But unfortunately, unlike our sister properties 1A and 1B, these will be proceeding separately for funding. Building 4A is at 5 stories. And one reason for that is because if we went any higher, we would avoid the costly steel construction podium there. So if and building 4B is at 7 stories. We just don't think it's quite feasible right now to put forward a building as large as 4B at this time.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the parking and drop-off. I appreciate the fact, as always, that this is close to transit and that this will be convenient for folks using transit, but I'm also thinking about drop-off of parcels, packages, seniors, etc. Could you explain to me in the parking diagram how and where that happens?
Yeah, so the plan currently on United Street, and we worked this out as buildings 2 and 3 were being developed, is that this space in this corner is actually the drop off for these 3 buildings. There's also some parallel parking on the street if that needs to happen. The drop off would, for 4B, we would anticipate that we would have a drop off temporary space here off of Center Street.
So just in terms of 4A, I'm stepping out of my van or Uber with my 2 bags of groceries to go into my home. Where's the lobby? How does that work?
Right. So the drop off is here and the lobby entrance is here. So
Okay,
you come up this curb cut it in.
But thanks, I didn't understand that. So.
Mark, you had a plan of the ground floor activities. Can you show it in that context?
Yeah, so you can see the drop off here and the entrance lobby to 4A here. And then also the entrance lobby to 2 is here and 3 is here. So that sort of serves all of them.
Is there any concern about congestion? I mean, I know that the through street is not happening, but is there any concern about this intersection of United and Lamartine serving 3 fairly significant buildings in terms of Ubers, drop-offs, etc.? Is that something that transportation has looked at or is worried about?
ETD has been very involved in these conversations. They haven't expressed too much concern.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to follow on the questions about parking. No pun intended, what is driving the parking here in terms of the ratio to units? And I guess I would ask that in context of 4A and 4B, and then a second to that is also given that the Jackson Square T is 2 doors down.
I can help speak to that. So the original Phase 4 design, as Mark had mentioned, included an underground garage with about 95 parking spaces. Because that underground parking is just too expensive for the project to absorb, we're now proposing to move the parking above ground. With the new split between buildings 4A and 4B, we're able to fit, right here, it shows about 72 parking spaces into the updated design. TCB, JP&DC, and Urban Edge, collectively Center Street partners, along with the Boston Housing Authority, made a commitment to the residents to maintain a 0.5 parking ratio for returning residents that will be temporarily relocated to make way for construction of these 2 buildings. That means we're providing enough parking for at least half of those returning residents, which are not just for the Phase 4 buildings, but also when we get to the future Phase 5 buildings, 5A and 5B, parking is reserved for those residents as well. So even with this reduction in total parking spaces, we're still able to meet that commitment. And unfortunately, it's difficult to go much lower than that. Between buildings 4A and 4B, and 5A and 5B, there's a total of 117 replacement units, which leaves us with 59 parking spaces for those residents. So ultimately, it leaves about, if I'm doing my math right, 13 or 14 spaces for any new residents, but also for visitors and staff working out of these 2 buildings, which is not a lot. especially when you consider that we have a lot of seniors at Mildred Hailey who rely on services for home care and visiting nurses who might need to park at the site to see their patients. So a lot of the parking design here is to make sure that there's enough parking for those returning residents, not just in the phase 4 footprint, but also phase 5 as well.
Okay, thank you.
In that interim parking plan, it seems that the parking that's in phase 4A will be exposed to Center Street. So I presume there's some sort of strategy for how to screen that?
Yeah, because there's actually a pretty significant grade change from Center Street up. And then because of where we have to sort of set the first floor elevation for 4A, the parking is down from the high point. So if you're standing on Center Street, there's actually a grade change up, and then you're going actually back down. So there will be, I think we'll sort of shape the edge of this to create a berm, and it would be planted. So that would all be screened from view from Center Street.
So Catherine, I believe you were going to talk, and I invite any commissioner who is also on the call, but I cannot see your face. You can follow up after Catherine.
No, thank you. I was gonna add, I want to say it was Commissioner Hassan, I could be wrong, but just with the parking piece, so if those lots are full and folks need to go somewhere, where are they going is a question that I have. Because I can very well guarantee there's gonna be double parking, triple parking, and that will cause an influx of things, just knowing how even friends of mine that live in that area, there's just kind of like a code. And so I'm just wondering how you all are thinking about if and when those spots are taken up and there's spillover, where can other people be redirected?
Sorry, I was on mute. So buildings 1A and 1B have an underground garage of about 98 parking spaces. Those two buildings are opening up this year, so we're going to be keeping a very close eye on the demand for that parking. So far, what I've heard is that there are a lot of returning residents, but those that might not need vehicles and won't be registering more than one vehicle. So we're hopeful that there is excess parking there just in case. The Boston Housing Authority also has issued parking stickers to residents. If they do choose to park within either the 1A, 1B garage or the phase 4 parking area, then they would have to give up that BHA parking space, but the BHA does have parking elsewhere around the site as well. But of course, understandably so, a lot of commuters who rely on the T station adjacent. So it's really keeping an eye on demand here for parking spaces in both locations, the 1A, 1B, and 4A, 4B.
Thank you.
Of course.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Laura.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm in an airport and it's an awkward setup. If we could stick with this plan, I have a question about the red line that is shown around 4A. The line basically cuts the parking, one of the bays of parking off. So is that included in phase 1 or not?
It is. So this parking is part of phase 1, but it's temporary parking in phase 1. The lines are sort of our internal lot lines between buildings. But so what you can see, I'll switch to phase 2. So it cuts right through the sort of island between the parking in the future. But so this is just a temporary condition.
Got it. And then, Mark, you had talked about some improvements to that open space now. What goes on in that space?
In this open space?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not sure we have a plan of that, but right now there's a sort of a asphalt path, circular asphalt path. You can come off Center Street, circulate around the path, and then it gives you access to the existing buildings. And there's some benches and things. It's not a very active space right now.
So if that's the case, then are you making other improvements to that lot?
I think what we're showing right now is that when this other building that you can see dashed comes down, we would try to probably seed a grass lawn in this area similar to what's there now and stitch that in. This path right here would actually be new. These little paths that are off of it are existing. So it's trying to provide just a very simple connection through the space, but leave the space similar to what it is now.
Yeah, I hear that. It might be good to, we're not reviewing that, but in the future, it might be good to seek some, just do a little bit more study on how people would use that, since it's an unknown interim condition. But let me go to the plan that you presented tonight. And I have a basic question about the parking that is under the buildings. It's basically like there are garages on the backs of the building. Is that right? So where it says phase 4A, are those actually like on the ground floor of the building? Is that like you would pull into a parking space? Is that correct? So it is sort of like a garage, right? And are those open spaces?
Yes.
In other words, there's nothing like a garage that comes down and closes, or
there's no door. It's just sort of tucked underneath the building.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then talking about, there was a short description of the planted area in the parking area. Is that going, and permeable pavers as well, is that going to basically take all of the stormwater in that asphalted area?
I don't think we've fully designed to do that. We'll take it. I think we are planning another underground stormwater system.
Okay. So you'd be able to collect some of that, and that would come through the rain garden, I guess, that's in between. So it's not occupiable really. It's just meant to be a sustainable stormwater approach.
That's right.
Okay, and then I'll move on to the corridor. I really like the barbells of activity on either side of this corridor. Long corridors like this are always awkward to get right in the landscape. The only thing that I would say is that the one that goes, the one that's on La Martine, which looks like it's smaller, I wonder if that wouldn't be better a little larger as well, since that is on a pretty active side. So it's where drop-off is. It's and I understand that the Center Street space is meant to be more active. I see that as more publicly active, and I wonder if the courtyard on the other side could be thought of more as a neighborhood active. And if you live in this corridor, I mean, there's a lot of buildings right at this intersection. And I wonder if this couldn't be made bigger to provide a better place and have subspaces, as the one on Center Street does, where people can meet. Seems like it would be a valuable space in the neighborhood. And then could we go to the perspectives, the landscapes perspectives, which, by the way, are really, that's a great one to start on. I would imagine that trying to make the La Martine space, you'd have concerns about being able to have a properly sized lawn, since that's really a space for play and just breathing room in the city. And I wonder if you couldn't maybe tighten up the amphitheater that's off of Center Street, so that you can kind of move everything down to enlarge that space. I just think social spaces are so important in, you know, these kinds of neighborhoods, that I'd like them pumped up as much as they can be.
Yeah, I wanted to do a follow-up question to that. Laura, I was going to ask, could you, I remember seeing this project before, so I appreciate kind of all the advancements you've made. Could you just do a quick reminder for me and maybe my fellow commissioners for this open space, which on some plans you call it the La Martine open space, what the programming aspirations are for this space? Is it primarily a pass-through space, or do you imagine that folks might be using it for, I don't know, families? Or if you could just give me a quick overview, just to remind myself.
For sure. So I think that from our perspective, again, it was previously discussed and approved, and this was admittedly before I was on the project, but I think it's, as was mentioned, how do you pack in a lot of program and a lot of opportunity and a lot of different size spaces in a fairly linear and tight space? So we did, you know, the number 6 has a proper lawn space with seating at the other side.
Okay.
At either side, and then the plaza at Center Street is slightly larger per comments that happened in the previous approval. So we gave that a little bit more space, but it really is both meant to be a pass-through thoroughfare for pedestrians and cyclists, but also definitely used for families and residents, and also just other folks in the neighborhood who might want to have, you know, a cup of coffee and sit in the plaza, or just a moment to sit down on the way to work, or it's really a multifunctional park space with as much program that we can comfortably pack in there.
Mm-hmm. And so that perspective that you kind of settled on, that had this one, that is, can you place me in the plan?
Yes.
The plan you just had. Yeah.
Yes.
Where are we?
So you're pretty close to the 3 right there. If you bump the 3
We're
over,
looking at the lawn on the right side then?
so you're standing at the 3 on the path and kind of looking at the corner of 4B. So you see that 10 amenity space in the background, and on the left you see the plaza. So you're basically
Because I'm seeing like a curvilinear path, and I wonder if you're actually,
I think you're
I
at
think that's what's
5.
confusing. Yeah, something's confusing me about the differentiation of the plan versus the perspective. Do you see how like there's a curvy path?
Right.
Yeah, so that's the secondary access path.
Right, but
right.
The 3.
Laura, do you see that? I'm having trouble placing myself.
I do see where this
There's a
is.
discrepancy, and I think it's just your dot may be in the wrong place.
I think the dot is a little bit high there. To
Yeah,
your point, I think it is
That's
up a
okay.
little bit high.
I don't mean to nitpick. I think, you know, like when I look at that perspective, which is a lovely perspective, and it has multiple benches, but it has all these kids that you're putting into the drawing. I just wonder if there is an opportunity to like replace those, it looks like stone or precast concrete benches into something a little bit more playful. Like it doesn't have to be a playground, but something which really kind of, you already have the kids in the drawing, and to give them something to do. So I know it's maybe too close to some of the residences, but I think that's what I'm searching for. I know that we already approved this plan, but it's something that occurs to me when I see this, is that there might be an opportunity to, at least because you have a large lawn kind of in front of it, I believe. And so that small place, and it might just be just changing the off-the-shelf furnishings to be colorful, or like rockers or something for the community that says, this is a place of play. The only other comment that I have, and I have a feeling that this was maybe part of the approved plan before, but it has to do with the streetscape. I'm trying to find, I think you actually tucked those in the appendix. But it is, I just wonder, and I don't know what the contextual streetscape condition is, but it's section X that I just worry about the width of the sidewalk. And just to take a look at these sidewalks, some of them are generous 8 feet, others are 6 feet, and to make sure that if they are adjacent to a streetscape and you have 7 feet of planting, that you've made a study of pedestrian movement through, that 6 feet is going to be sufficient to manage, you know, when this becomes a very successful place, a mom with her carriage and then like a couple walking by. So that's just a minor comment. And then I'm making the assumption that from the tree removal and replacement, that there are no trees that are actually getting saved, right, in this plan. You're just showing us this as saying that I guess I'm just trying to understand, are you saving any trees in this project?
There are a couple on the streetscape that we are they're a little bit, it's hard to see, they're a little bit of a darker shade of green at the
I
corner
think I
there.
see it, those two.
Yeah. And so it's something that, yeah, just to answer the question, because there are a couple of, you know, very beautiful mature trees on the site. And so it's just kind of doing our due diligence to repopulate as best we can and create a new, you know, canopy across the site.
So when you talk about in phase A, the 12 and 25 trees, the 25 trees that you're adding, you're losing 147 caliper inches. Do you have a sense of how much you're replenishing in terms? It's more helpful to me to know the caliper size of each individual tree rather than the total caliper size, but you don't need to answer that today if you don't have it off the cuff, but would love to really understand better what the commitment is for tree sizes, and would love to hear that you have a commitment to at least like 4-inch caliper trees for everything as a minimum, and that there might be some 6-inch caliper trees or something like that.
So I do know, just as a reference, we haven't gotten to that specificity yet for the 4A and 4B plan, but for building 2, I do know that the trees that we've specified through the construction sets are 4 to 4.5 caliper. So I think that would be largely, I agree with you, you know, really trying to have something in there that at opening that feels substantial and like we've made a good effort, not little spindly saplings. So
might be good to add a few slightly larger trees so you can get, I had to use my calculator to do my math, but to get close to the loss in phase A of the caliper size. The trees are going to make this project great. They're going to make it feel like a neighborhood. And so I'd ask for that commitment, but take a look at the streetscapes, and I think this is going to be a transformative project. It's going to really make this neighborhood feel like people live here, and so appreciate all the work.
So this is Commissioner Sykes. If I could just maybe pick up on, I think a thread, McYoung, that you started with in terms of softening some of the you know, surroundings that you can control. I mean, I think part of this is set by the history of the place and the very you know, kind of dense brick environment, and trying to find a way to build a more hospitable and welcoming space in the landscape. So I totally echo that. So to piggyback on that a little bit, I'd love to hear a little more about the amenity spaces that abut those public spaces, because I don't have a real sense of what they are and how animated they are. I specifically have some concerns making sure there is both light being generated by the building onto the landscape, and a sense of occupancy that's happening that will make it feel lived in throughout the life cycle of a day. And in particular, making sure there's both passive surveillance and also some transparency. So maybe you can talk to that a little bit in terms of those spaces.
Sure. So in 4A, you can see the entry and lobby on this corner and wrapping around the corner a bit. We have a leasing office next to that and an amenity space next to that. And so that amenity space also abuts this outdoor resident space. And so that whole facade opens into or looks into that lawn space and amphitheater seating that we were just talking about. In addition to that, resident only space that sort of looks into that amphitheater space. And then on 4B, we have the lobby on the corner with an adjacent amenity space that will be opposite in the future, a space that occurs between 4B and the future phase 5.
And then you have a bike. You have a bike space. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so you have to sort of find the places to put the electrical rooms and trash rooms. So we tried as much as possible to keep these more active spaces on the corners. And so the bike room here moves to the corner. This bike room is adjacent to the lobby, so that more public space wraps around the corner here and wraps around the corner here, and then appears again on that corner.
And I mean, I guess I wonder a little bit about that in the sense that Center Street is going to be more active and have more passive surveillance eyes from the street that, are going to be generated by the volume of traffic. In some ways, I'm almost more concerned about animating where the bike storage room is in a way, because there's less activity probably happening there throughout the day. I get it. You have some slave spaces that you have, to serve the building that have to go somewhere. But you might think about moving the more active zones to the less active landscapes in an effort to develop some activity. In general, I have no problem with the organization changes of the party. I think it's working quite well. I think, devil's always in the details in terms of how the treatments, the materials, the lighting, both on the building and on the landscape, are handled, and how active these spaces will feel. So I think staff can handle that, but it's just a concern I have given where we're evolving to from where we have been in this site.
Yeah, Kirk, if I could just build on that, also within that kind of concept of, let's call it human comfort, I think if staff can work with this team to make sure that the seating is comfortable. Right now, it looks like there's a lot of kind of these bars of precast elements, but I think this is might want to feel more like a park-like setting, and maybe it can use more off-the-shelf benches that are comfortable with armrests and all of those things. So.
Awesome. So I see that we have Linda Eastley and we have Laura Solano, and we haven't gotten to architecture, so maybe.
Can I make one observation?
Yeah.
Amy, which is, maybe this is because this is the first time that we're meeting in both a hybrid and a hybrid setting, is that I think our initial presentation meetings and subcommittee meetings over the period where we were remote have kind of morphed. And I'm just remembering that initially the purpose of this meeting is to raise issues that we would like to talk about in more detail in subcommittee. And so maybe that's the spirit, that we should be talking about the architecture and landscape issues so that we can get into the nitty-gritty of some of these issues in more focus in a subcommittee.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that in principle. I think what makes it hard is that we only have 3 meetings, and one of them is only a subcommittee to follow. And I think everyone is trying to get their comments in, but maybe what we can do is really focus on comments rather than ask questions at this time. I think that'll be more helpful and more focused.
Makes sense.
So I'm going to go to Linda Eastley, and then we'll come back to Laura and Jonathan. Kathy, okay, well, let's start with Linda and Laura. If you guys could be a little bit tight, we're going to go back into the room and have Kathy, Coderitas, and Jonathan comment.
I love the growing pains of our meeting today, but I think it's great that we've got some people in person. We can't see you either, so we can just see each other joining this way. In the spirit of what David Hassine was saying, I was going to just offer my comments as things that I'd like to see in the subcommittee. Mark, can we go to one of the perspectives that shows 4A and 4B? I wanted to pick up on the comment that BCDC staff made at the top of the presentation and ask whether in subcommittee we might see some studies that did look at something that was less vertical but also kept the kind of important moments at the corners, which I think make a lot of sense to me to be vertical. So I'd love to see that. I'd also like to learn a little bit more about this resident open space. We've touched on it in some of the landscape comments. Is it at grade? How do we think about that being a really successful outdoor room sitting right on the parking lot? And okay, great. And then how do you enter it? And it looked like there was a gate in is this above grade?
It's on grade with the parking and with the first floor of the two buildings.
Okay. And it looked like in plan there was actually some maybe symbol of a gate. So I just love to know how you pass through this space, if at all, to get to parking and vice versa. And then in addition to the open space and the architectural verticality question, I really think it was successful to tuck the parking in the middle. And I think we've talked a lot about how that works and how the grade works. And what I'd like to understand a little bit more in section is how do you come up from kind of Center Street into these units, because there's a grade. And as I understood it, Mark, you kind of come up and then you dip down to the parking, and then you might kind of then come up a little bit more through the underbuilding parking spaces and then up to United Street. So just understanding that section. And for all I know, there's a amazing model sitting in front of you guys at City Hall that we can't see. Is there one?
That would be amazing.
Okay.
There is not.
Okay, so understanding that in section would be great. So those were the three comments I wanted to get in. Thanks.
All right, Laura, we want you to wrap up your comments, as we know that Mick Young might have chimed in at the time you were talking. So let's have you go next.
I was just going to summarize what I'd like to see studied for a committee, and that is it's really looking at the two spaces, the social spaces on Center and the one that's at the end of Lamartine, and understand how comfort comes into those spaces as well as the social aspects. Like, what is going to make neighbors want to come and visit this so that the space can stay active and healthy? I think that's the main thing that I'm interested in. Although I am intrigued by Mick Young's comment about can that area be more playful, the one that's uphill of the Center Street space. So that's it.
Excellent. Kathy?
I only want to build on the question about the private amenity outdoor space and understand it better in terms of accessibility and really the point of it, but more stepping into what's likely to be the near-term condition, what the interim need for a private open space will be, given that building B won't be there yet.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Okay, so on the building, my general impression, I don't know if you can flip to one of your views of the 4B. Yeah, this one. So to me, the podium to street just feels too high, or this multi-level brick, as you called it. It seems like it even gets taller as you go down the section towards United Street. And so I think I would be, it would be helpful to see a really strong justification as to how that two-level podium relates to Center Street and sort of what's driving that versus maybe dropping that a floor. Because I do think it adds some sort of a perception to the overall height and scale of the building. On 4A, I definitely support the verticality and would want to see studies that maybe balance the horizontals and verticals more, while to Linda's point, also keeping in mind the corner as maybe points of hierarchy, especially if that's where entry happens. And then finally, if you go back to a plan, I'd like to know more about the edge relationships between how the two buildings engage, meaning the width between them, like the negative space there, yes, and then on the other one, and then also just the overall width dimensions of the courtyard. I think you have a nice, if you go to an upper level plan, you have a nice kink that's going on with 4B, is it? As it sort of like starts to respond to 4A on that, yeah, right there. And I like something like that on the other ones. It'd be nice, just an acknowledgement that you're getting pretty close, and what can the building edges do to better relate.
Can I piggyback onto Jonathan's comment, which I completely agree with? I also feel like the base, it does seem to be riding a little high. Maybe there's a contextual explanation for that relative to other buildings up and down the street. So if that's something that you wanted to show us or explain to us, that would make a lot of sense. And I'm not sure that the base has to be 1 story or 2 stories. I think it could live in between there somehow, architecturally, if that was something that felt interesting to pursue. In general, I think the architecture of the buildings feels well composed and handsome to me. I'm not opposed to the vertical expression of the B building, largely because it's actually not on Center Street. It's inboard into the neighborhood, where I think that this strong base and maybe more traditional expression does feel more appropriate to me on Center Street, which I know is a future phase. One thing, though, I think it was mentioned maybe by staff about concern about the cornice or how the buildings are finished. With a lot of this kind of construction, I know there's a lot of pressure to eliminate cost around mechanical screening. And it feels like I'd like to know what the strategy is for mechanical screening, and if the parapet or cornice or mechanical screening condition might offer some opportunities for how to cap off the top of the building, or at least parts of the building. I think that's it. I just would say that I do like in this neighborhood in particular, the notion that the windows stack and that it's not a slippy slidey situation. That feels appropriate to me in this context and in this neighborhood. Thank you.
So I think the only additional comment that I want to ask to bring to subcommittee is I'm really concerned about the timing between 4A and 4B happening, and that interim condition is really going to have maybe not a positive, effect on Center Street. So what can we do in that interim period to make that a little bit more plausible? I think the one thing we definitely didn't see are elevations of the backside where we see the parking underneath. I really want to see those elevations so we really get a true understanding of what's happening. It would be great if you came with 3 plans: the existing condition with topography, the 4A phase 1, and then the 4B, so that we can really see what's happening at every, at every phase. It's not clear to me. I see it here, but I don't understand the topography at all. And I understand that there is a significant grade change. What is the investment that you'll do in terms of landscape at this phase is an important question that I have. And then once you add 4B, I do wonder, I really think the Lamartine open space is shaping up to be nicely. I think you've heard enough comments. It really feels like it favors 4A as their open space. So my question to you is what happens on the south side of 4B, where it really hits that red property line, you know, that page south? Like, it really needs some attention in my mind to make it feel like a place or an additional open space for the 4B residents. But the inside interior, I mean, the elevations of the inside of this courtyard on both 4A and 4B, I think would be important drawings to also bring to subcommittee. I think the comments on the architecture, you know, I generally agree with. I think the stripe, the verticality is fine. I just wonder if tone on tone is better than being so contrasting in materials.
Yeah. And to your point about the interim condition, I noted that there are trees that are currently existing, which look like they're being taken down for the interim condition. And if they're really nice, mature trees, I wonder if they should stay during that period of time. And whether there's an opportunity in a lawn-on-Z kind of way to create some sort of fun interim plaza that people enjoy working around the existing.
Yeah, and I think I mean, the reality is these funding, the affordable housing funding takes a while. So there is going to be the public perception that it's a new normal. We're sitting here seeing it as an interim condition, but people will go through holidays and seasons and summers and winters before phase 2 or the next phase happens.
I think it's a great comment, and it's something I think we can bring back to our colleagues at the Transportation Department to maybe work with Nate Lash to identify whether we can think about this. Because I think, you know, given the funding round and the tightness around this, the landscape often is, you know, a place where funding doesn't go towards. Right. So we have to be very judicious about what resources are actually available. But let's see what we can chat with our colleagues at the Transportation Department about.
I want to make, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kirk.
No, I was just going to say, I do want to make sure we're considering the whole 24-hour cycle of use. It's great to see all this green space, even if it's in the interim, but I really would love us to think about, you know, uplighting trees or, you know, just the level of ambient lighting that makes this comfortable. It's just, I live in this neighborhood and it's a very dense, dark place now that we need to enliven at every stage of the evolution of the phasing of this project. So I don't have a sense of that, but I'm sure staff can work with them to make sure it feels welcoming at 11 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Just
one comment that go ahead, Laura.
Just one other request for the next, for this subcommittee meeting, which is to get photographs of what that green space looks like now. And I know there's a building there, but if we could get some views of that, I think it would help us to understand both the potential and the limitations for that space.
I was just going to chime in and say that, you know, the diagram with the parking in the center was really uncomfortable to me, but I understand based on your parking count that you have to meet, it probably, you know, makes sense. I'm not going to bring that up as a problem, but I do think it comes down to the materiality. If that is asphalt from building edge to building edge, it's going to feel terrible. And so I would love to know, in terms of materiality, what you're imagining. Are there some patternings of pavers that you could introduce? Like, it just can't be just, you know, tarmac there and be a good space. But I do think parking can become a nice, you know, addition to the architecture if it's done well and the materials are considered.
I want to echo that because I think there's a lot of opportunity, not just looking at the parking stalls closest to the rain garden that's proposed in the center, but also the pavement treatment around it. Because we could imagine that, you know, the residents of 4A and 4B can have a weekend pop-up, right? And the cars aren't there, and that could be activated with tents and other sorts of really fun programming. And I think if we're looking at a material expression there that feels more like human scaled, it can really transform that parking court into a space that can transform from parking to community hub and activation space.
I think it's also something we've been talking internally about, is that so many of those residents who face the rear, that like will overlook that. So really making that feel more comfortable and like a design space is really important.
You've talked a lot about the elderly in this development, but is it a full range of ages that are living here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the very small to the very elderly. Got it.
Correct. I think we were speaking, Kathy, specifically to the replacement units, right?
Yes.
So, and that population tends to be on the older side.
I just want to flag that it's 6:15 and I think we're losing two of our commissioners.
Yeah, I know that Linda Easley signed off already, so I want to see if there are any public comments. We have to do that first, I assume. I think we're ready.
A reminder that starting on January 1st, 2026, the commission will limit live public commentary to the project's introduction. Members of the public interested in submitting comments to the commission are encouraged to do so in writing by emailing them to bcdc@boston.gov at any phase of the project's review. However, until then, we continue to take live public commentary, so at this time, we invite any member of the public in attendance, either in person or via the phone, who wish to contribute public comment to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. If you're joining in person, we just ask that you come sit at the table so that our microphone can pick up your question or comment. Lucy, do you see anybody with a raised hand? Great, so we'll close the public comment period.
Excellent. So commissioners, we need a motion.
Send this to subcommittee?
That could be it, yes.
Yeah.
Second. All right, I believe Linda Easley has left, but I'll call on her just in case. Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Accused.
Here to vote. Laura Solano.
Yes.
Kirkside.
Yes.
Jonathan Garland.
Yes.
David Hassin.
Yes.
Kathy Koderitas.
Yes.
And myself, yes, sent to subcommittee. And I believe that gets us to 7. Great. Excellent. So we look forward to seeing the proponent in subcommittee. And with that, we have next informal presentation. We're going to review plan downtown. So I believe I pass it on to Andrew Namias to walk us through the presentation.
Great.
I really do hope people take advantage of food.
Andrew,
I don't want to. There is food here, no peer pressure.
I think this will gather speed.
Excellent. Some calories.
Let me help.
Wonderful.
Yeah, please. I appreciate your time and giving me a chance to give an overview of downtown zoning. I can keep this quick and open things up to questions on some of the changes, but next slide. The zoning itself was passed by the zoning commission last month. Changes to plan downtown itself that included design guidelines was also approved in September. And all of this is part of a process that started back in 2018 with the initiation of plan downtown that resulted in the plan document that also led into a zoning process that involved multiple drafts and multiple engagement and stakeholder meetings over the course of the 2 years. Next slide. So the goals of the zoning as well as the planning really touched on, one, strengthening historic preservation and supporting and office to residential conversion as well as adaptive reuse, really enabling and prioritizing more housing downtown, as well as reducing barriers for local businesses, and overall of this, reinforcing our commitment to state shadow regulations on the area. Next slide. So the zoning area in question really encompasses the districts and areas between Tremont Street and the Greenway itself. It includes kind of the lower historic character areas of the ladder blocks, as well as the work district, as well as the taller development of the financial district. Some of the other key areas are just south of the public garden, including the Park Plaza area. Next slide. So the zoning introduces 2 new districts, replacing existing districts that are, I believe there's about 20 of them, some of them very hyper-specific. So this was really looking, trying to look comprehensively at the different types of character areas and spaces downtown, and opportunities for development and their needs for also preservation. So one district, the Skylo DT district, that sets up lower height limits, a smaller building floor plate maximum as a means of maintaining the smaller scale of those areas. So that really encompasses the ladder blocks area that has smaller buildings and more historic fabric. The Sky District, meanwhile, that really is meant to maximize mixed-use development in the area. It's in that area that height limits, the max is state shadow law and critical airspace limit, so FAA limit, whichever is the smaller of the two. And so the zoning takes several key steps to strengthening historic preservation. Next slide. One being the districts themselves, so the Skylo district, again, setting dimensional regulations when it comes to height and floor plate maximum that are specific to the area. And then next slide. This has, the district itself has gone through various iterations. So over time, one being influenced initially by the planned downtown boundaries, to then over time working with stakeholders to expand it based off of feedback about key sites that were of concern and key historic sites that should be included with key input from Kathy and team. So another tool that the zoning introduces is new means of establishing PDAs in the area. Up until now, there are only specific areas that are eligible downtown. This allows PDAs within the Skylo DT district, but it's a very targeted and limited criteria. So the PDA must include, besides just hitting the 1 acre minimum, it must include a designated landmark. At least 60% of the project must be residential. And as part of all this, it must invest and preserve landmarks and historic buildings in that area. So ultimately, this is meant to help tie investment from what might be kind of larger housing development in this zone to needed investment in landmarks in that area, with the understanding that some of the preservation involved, especially in restoring some of these sites, requires a larger scale of development, and that the PDA can be used as a tool to create more controls, especially when it comes to mapping and design, than necessarily how the specifics that zoning can get to. And I think one key model here is we looked at, for example, the Paramount Theater example that was kind of tied to the Ritz-Carlton development PDA. that helps enable this restriction. Next slide. And then also the zoning reduces some of the barriers that obviously residential conversion projects have faced. So this has eliminated some of the requirements for open space and yards. I think even like a recent project now, Miller needs to go to the ZBA to get a variance from those requirements. Next slide. And then the zoning, we're also introducing several new dimensional requirements and tools that haven't been in place downtown. So, for example, a lot of this is kind of focuses on, you know, large blocks, how we can create and expand the public realm. Some of these really only trigger if it's a larger site, so above 25,000. You start needing a smaller floor plate size and building lot coverage. If it's an even larger lot, that's when you start to need a certain amount of ground floor outdoor amenity space, which is really like an expansion of the sidewalk in the public realm. The zoning also includes restrictions or requirements for upper story setbacks, limits the amount of blank walls on the ground floor. And then one new element too is actually introducing a smaller design review threshold. So projects above 20,000 square feet will now have to go through small project design review, which wasn't a requirement for the downtown area before. Next slide. And then a key priority of the plan has always been unlocking affordable housing and really prioritizing that downtown as a means of activating the area. So one key element to this has been throughout the process identifying key opportunity sites for housing. Part of that really focusing on the Washington Street corridor, especially for it being you know, directly on top of T stations, but also sites that some of these soft sites and underutilized sites that could really accommodate new density in housing. Next slide. So the zoning makes several moves to prioritize residential growth, and part of that is actually restrictions or creating, making other uses such as research labs, hotels, as well as extra large offices conditional. And the residential lab spaces and hotel uses, one key driver for that is the conditionality is to ensure that we're looking at loading requirements and the impact of pickup drop off on the public realm. In terms of office uses, the move there was to really ensure that we're looking at every opportunity to introduce housing alongside office spaces of that size. Understanding that is, you know, a large move to take in a kind of a downtown that is both a job center and that we hope to expand as a residential neighborhood. That provision will expire in 2030, but the zoning commission does have an opportunity to kind of reevaluate that going forward. Next slide. And then again, we really wanted to emphasize how, given the amount of density that we can achieve downtown, this can create a degree of affordable housing that's not feasible in the rest of the city, especially considering the inclusionary zoning requirements we have in place that have a level of affordability requirement that has been applied in the same way to downtown projects until now. Next slide. That'll be important too. And then when it comes to supporting business growth downtown, next slide, we've updated the land use table to align with our modernized land use table, and part of this was eliminating barriers hyper-specific downtown land use restrictions that allow things like millinery shops and lamp shops, but not fitness uses or escape rooms. That was a ZBA. Those have been forbidden. And then on top of that, ensuring that shops that have takeout, so cafes, ice cream shops, will be allowed and no longer conditional.
Does that mean they no longer need the level of permitting that they currently have, or is it just use determination?
Yeah, so it's only, right, there's still the same permit process, but when it comes to, they will no longer.
They don't have to go to the ZBA.
Exactly. So we had cafe case come through, escape room, took an extra 6 months. So each of these, I think, really add up in terms of time. Next slide. And then finally, we've heard throughout the process a lot of concern about impact of new development on open spaces and shadow on the common public garden. And there are laws in place that restrict the amount of new shadow and effectively create height limits for sites across the area. And next slide. And so part of the process was really reinforcing our commitment to the state law itself. It supersedes zoning, and it's more enforceable than zoning itself. And really just highlighting the fact that in terms of areas that are kind of enabled through this process to achieve new height, that's really focused along Washington Street. There are no new areas that can go up to 700 feet, and that was a concern we heard throughout the process. The only new areas really up at Washington and State Street, where there's already 500 foot, of course. So, you know, we wanted to really reinforce the fact that we're trying to make it clear through the zoning text itself that, you know, the restrictions within the state law and how building heights need to adhere to those. So that's really a quick overview, but happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask a question? Thank you, this is super helpful, and I'm very, very happy with how this has evolved. And thanks to all those participants that in particular have really thought hard about the historic character of the city as an aspect of what makes Boston a tourist destination and all these other things, which I think has largely been fulfilled here. I am curious that, you know, obviously the Macy's site is one of the largest available sites in the city, and how that gets balanced with the importance of this downtown institution, this department store that is really one of the last surviving department stores in the central business district, and in my mind, an important anchor. I'm sure there was conversation about that, because it looks like there's a Target on that site. And I understand why, but I'm also concerned about it as a place that the city feels belongs to everyone. You know, it's a gathering point. And housing is important, of course, to activate downtown, but so are these sort of destination, you know, retail events. So I was just curious if there was conversation about that or thought about that.
Macy's is kind of key site that, I mean, one of the big factor there is that the roof is entirely a data center.
That's right.
So we don't really see that.
That's changing.
That top portion is pretty important.
Yeah.
Does that, I'm sorry, does that interrupt, I wonder about the extent of the Macy's coverage, because I know in other conversations we've talked about that mega block there, so that it is an institution, but it's also a barrier when you're walking down Washington Street.
There's Lafayette Place or what. what the
Exactly.
collective members may.
That if there were thinking around figuring out a way to divide or reconfigure that in a way that makes it more woven into the smaller blocks around it, is that data center going to is that already in the way of that actually happening?
No,
Or is it more confined to the top of these parcels up near the Macy's edge?
yeah, it's really just it is just above the Macy's.
The roof.
Yeah.
So not per floor.
So not
Right.
Lafayette Place.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So I think the opportunity is there. Is, if Lafayette Center were to develop new ways in the future to introduce the through block connection in some way. I've always looked at Temple Place as kind of in alignment with that split between Macy's and Lafayette. So ideally, that's something that we'd want to pursue. It's also a PDA, so that's something that we would have to revisit that. So there's an opportunity.
Lafayette was a PDA.
And I think, Andrew, something to note as well, I think to your point around the commercial uses, even though we are trying to incentivize residential development here, we have made clear provisions to allow for commercial uses at a pretty high density still in square footage that allow for some of these big anchor sort of, tenants to still occupy some of these ground floors. And I think there's some key provisions around what that is. I think it might be somewhere in the 50,000 square foot space.
Right, so it's only offices above 250,000 square feet are conditional, and that's new development. Existing office towers of that size can still convert in new ways. We wanted to make sure that we are keeping that option open and flexible.
The transportation infrastructure here supports all of this. Kind of vital.
I am curious if we have any commissioners on the call who have questions, but while we're seeing if they have questions, tell me about that 1121 Bromfield. It's the one site that kind of skips over. What's there now, and was that the project that we reviewed a few years ago? It is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's called out there.
It is called out, yes.
Yeah.
What is the status of that?
Yeah.
So as it was proposed, it was a commercial
Office
building, so.
yeah, with green space or something, yeah, balconies or something.
Yeah, there's
back.
I think
Anyway,
that thing.
yeah.
So everything that's in that dark blue hatch, each of those parcels, those are limited to 200 feet in height, unless they're 60% residential. And then in those cases, they can go up to state shadow law limit. In the case of the 1121 Bromfield site, however, it's limited to 500 feet. For example,
the shadow law?
For those sites, the shadow law would allow actually up to around 700 feet.
Okay.
But the provision in the zoning is limiting sites on that side of Washington to 500 feet. That's coming out of concern about the adjacency to the ladder blocks, the lower height area on the west side of Washington.
So this certainly will incentivize housing, which is the goal, obviously.
Right. So that project would need to adjust if it were to go above 200 feet.
Lizzie, I don't see any commissioners' faces like I could.
Yeah,
before.
no, it's Commissioner Sykes. So sorry about that. I'd love to know where the physical planning and regulatory limitations that are being discussed here meet economic sort of hurdles in terms of incentivizing critical mass in these areas. And, it's always the problem where physical planning meets economic planning. and we're doing this dance a little bit on the Shadow Commission that I'm on. And, just when is it, whose goals do you prioritize and how do you find kind of a balance? And so Can you talk a little bit to that, just so we can understand how this fits with other studies that may be going on the economic development of downtown and critical mass?
Sure. I think like one key element to this was trying to look at, multiple approaches, as many strategies as we could, to incentivize reinvestment at various scales. So that goes to the modernization of the uses, to kind of reduce what is really a financial burden on smaller businesses to open. The other element being for office conversion, to reduce those hurdles as well. And I think as we got to the largest scale, so really opening up opportunity for larger density, that it became more about looking at flexibility long-term, with the understanding that, inclusionary zoning requirements, as they are right now, are in themselves we heard from developers very much kind of a burden looking at the scale of development that we were even, proposing in a way downtown, given construction costs in the area. But in that way, like trying to open up as many doors as possible to flexibility when it comes to development. So finding either like different avenues for mixed use, different scales of residential development, but ensuring that we're, reevaluating that for each of these like kind of key sites that we've been looking at. So I don't know if that's answering your question completely, but
Well, I think it is and it isn't. I mean, in many ways, this is not unlike the Article 80 reform process that we've been involved in for a couple of years. I mean, I think looking to our peer cities and understanding how you get to critical mass and what the limitations are between either tax-based erosion or the future of work, any number of things that may create vitality or not, and then you kind of make sure that fits with the physical planning objectives and the shadow limitations. I mean, it's kind of threading a needle. I just want to make sure we don't end up with some very prescriptive, wonderful physical constructs for people to fit into, and you still can't build anything, or still can't get critical mass or bodies or feet on the street, or all the things that create a place that is vital, that we love. And certainly Washington Street's been through that in many cycles. So anyway, this is not the place for that. It's just sort of a cautionary, and maybe Diana can weigh in on that at some point, so we understand fully.
And Kirk, I think it's a great, point. And I think we did, this was a 7-year-long planning process that we had consultants that looked at this sort of economic performance, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. So we've been factoring that into our overall process. We've also had some peer review as well, just to make sure that, as we were developing these new zoning typologies, they worked for architects and that we could sort of work out the kinks. And then I think one of the most important pieces of this is that, as you mentioned yourself, we were threading a needle, and we were trying to ensure that we were maintaining historic preservation in this area, a value system that is enforcing the state shadow law, and the many protections that are afforded to these gems of open spaces that we have in our downtown, and really looking at where key growth opportunities exist and how we can enable that and incentivize it through the tools we have at our disposal.
Right.
No plan is going to be perfect, and I think the last thing I'll leave you with is that Kathleen, who leads our zoning team, and has really sort of instilled this in us, which is that we're putting the zoning out there. We hope the market responds. But if we learn something along the way that is a real barrier, right, to this incentivizing the growth that we want to see, we are getting into the habit of updating our zoning with a much more frequent basis, right? So if there are
there's a little snafu with how Sky Low or Sky High district are operating. We have the opportunities to address those, and we've been doing that very consistently with our squares and streets zoning that has been going through its regulatory review. So, we care about the downtown. It's a critical focus for this administration, and we hope that this, threads the needle in the best way so that we're creating as the right paths for developers to come in and invest in our downtown.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'm actually curious what this will do with respect to the, back to the market response, with respect to the office to resi conversion, which I think I've heard anecdotally is not easy to do. I mean, we've looked at some things, but just because of the, I don't know, the scale of the building, the location of the core, the depth, getting too deep in past the window wall, you name it, lots of complications. Budget consideration. So just the incentivizing of housing in the downtown in ways that weren't there before. I just wonder what that will do to kind of, because we're still balancing people working from home, not everybody's coming back to the office. So will those, where will the attention go? More to the incentivize more density, where you can do ground up new construction and design it for that purpose, or more of the adaptive reuse of the office stock that we have.
Just next week, actually, we have a project going to the board that's completely as of right office to residential conversion. It's directly across the street from the Custom House Tower on Milk Street. So it's one of those sort of low-slung historic wharf buildings, former wharf building, currently office. Looks vacant from what I see when I walk by, and it will go to our board, and then they can get their permits from ISD after that, and they won't have to have a trip to the Board of Appeal. And that's, an example on one of Andrew's slides where, we'd hope that in this building, it would be always an adaptive reuse of what's there, the historic building, and it just removes a barrier in terms of process of formally having to go to the Board of Appeals.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a
Great,
huge
great to have.
Demolition is
That's
going to
awesome.
create more barriers now, just from a materials
Yeah.
point of view, so.
And I think, we're trying to balance these pieces, right? So what you're seeing in the plan is really a manifestation of all the tools the city has to bear in terms of how do we try and where are the key opportunity sites to incentivize, whether that be new construction, historic preservation, office to resi conversion. There are all these different tools that are at play at the same time because we have to diversify our options in this sort of post-pandemic worldview of how downtowns operate. And I think, we're tracking our process, collecting the data, make sure that this is landing in a way that we hope, brings investment back into our downtown core.
Makes sense.
Great. Well, it would be nice to, in 6 months, to see how it's going.
I mean, we've said that our first, up until now, 4 other office conversion projects have had to go to the ZBA.
The ZBA, yeah.
So that'll be one helpful.
I think it would promote the sale of buildings, quite frankly, because you could purchase a building without knowing without the risk of ZBA.
Right. Right.
So, exciting. Any other commissioners on the call that have a comment? All right. Well, I think with that, we can vote to adjourn our meeting. I know we've lost a lot of commissioners. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Excellent. Sean, I need one last vote for you to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah. I vote that, but what happens if there isn't a quorum to adjourn?
I don't think it matters.
Love you all.
Kirk side.
Aye.
Laura Solano.
Aye.
Okay. I believe that's all that's on the call. Jonathan Garland.
Aye.
and Kathy Kotorides.
Yes.
Just confirming that Catherine Morris jumped off the call earlier. Yes? And then myself. Yes. So it was a short and sweet evening.
Well done,
Thank
Mimi.
you.
Thank you.